All right, so we have set up our project here. I have a bunch of different kinds of seating in my cafe. I have some scale figures and I have a cooking area. So I think we're ready to start setting up some kind of more architectural views that we might use in a presentation. And just before I get going here, I do want to mention that I got components off of the 3D warehouse, but there is also something called form fonts, which we have available on our desktop computers in the Art Center. Those are great. Form fonts is really high quality models, and I strongly recommend that you take a look at those. They have some very nice people in them, and also high quality furniture. And of course, any model that you find online from something like Steelcase, if it's in a format that SketchUp can read, it can be used. Sometimes they need to be painted or have other manipulation. So there's a lot of different sources for high quality models. Don't feel like you need to create every piece of furniture in your project. So when you are working on a project, it's nice to have a couple of views that you can quickly access. We've been turning on and off section planes and hiding things and all that. Let's save what's called a scene, and that will allow us to very quickly return to specific views. So for example, this is a great view, overview of my project. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to call up the scene manager. Now on PCs, like we've seen before, there are menus over here. The scenes menu should be in there in that tool palette. For us mere mortals running a Mac, you will have to go to the scenes menu. And what you'll see is a menu with nothing in it because we don't have any saved scenes. But what this allows you to do is save a view of your project and all the kind of information about that view. The camera location, whether or not there's geometry that's hidden, active section planes, and something called style and fog, which we haven't learned about. So all I have to do is click the little plus sign. And what it's going to tell me is, hey, you have modified something called a style. Do you want to modify the style that's in the project, or do you want to create a new style for this particular scene? Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to update the selected style, just because for right now, I don't want to talk too much about styles and confuse matters. So I'll choose Create Scene. And what you'll see, two things happen. First of all, there's a tab that shows up at the top of my screen. And second of all, there's a little preview icon up here that says Scene 1 that shows up in my Scenes menu. And I can rename that to call it, Interior Overview. And what this means is that as I model in my project, and maybe I'm moving people around, maybe I want to copy a scale figure, other to the back of the room or something like that, I can quickly access this view by just clicking on that tab up at the top of the screen. Okay. Every project is going to want to have some interior perspectives, right? We are mainly interior designers here, or interior architects. So to create an interior perspective, what you're going to want to do is place the station point, if you want to use the old drafting perspective terminology, or the camera in the new terminology. Well, down at the bottom of your large tool set, there are a couple of tools which are really handy for setting up perspectives. First of all, the position camera tool allows you to put your camera inside a project or in any location, really. So you see how I am now inside the project. It has set my eye height. Interesting enough, I'm not quite sure why, but it set the eye height at 7 feet, which is a little peculiar. Also, when you place the camera, it doesn't leave that tool active. It activates another tool called the Look Around tool. And the Look Around tool allows you to, you guessed it, look around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a scene with this perspective view in it. I'm just going to click the little plus sign. And Scene 2, I'm going to call this View to Back. Now, what's nice is now I have two scenes. I can quickly jump from one to the other. And SketchUp is more than happy to change the view. One thing that's a little misleading about this space is that there's none of the stuff up here. I want to be able to see that. Now, to be able to see that, I'm going to have to make some changes to the view. And this gets a little more complicated. What I like to do is have styles which have either the section plane on or off. And if I go to the window pull-down menu, you'll see that there's a whole menu called Styles. Now what that means is anytime you make graphical changes to your project, or it is possible to save those kind of graphical configuration as a style. Now right now I have a style, the only style in my project, which is just the default one. It's called Architectural Design Style. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the Edit tab, and I'm going to rename that. I'm going to just call it Section Planes Active. And when you do modify anything in your style, you'll see this little kind of recycle icon. Click that button to update the style. And there are a number of things that you can do. For example, if you want it to look a little more hand-drawn, you can add what are called extension lines and jitter lines, and it kind of darkens up the line weights a little bit, but it does make it look a little nicer. You can also tell it a number of things. Do you want to see the model axes or the guides? Usually you don't want to see those in perspective views, only when you're working. So I'm going to update the style again. There are also other things, section cut, fill lines and all that. We're going to leave that alone. Each of these little preview areas here has different elements that you can change. You can even change what a selected object looks like. Normally it's selected and it's blue, but we can select, make it some other color. The other thing is, remember we had section fill earlier. You can change that color if you wanted your poche to be gray, for example, which I'm actually kind of fond of. I'm going to go with a dark gray for my poche. It's just the kind of guy that I am. And I'll update that. So that will affect any scene that has this particular style applied. Now, adding all these horns and whistles, all these profiles and depth cues are really nice for presentation drawings. They are, however, kind of slow when you want to modify your model when you're still working on it. So if you find that your scene is just running too slow while you're doing your space planning, you can select a different style. And I'm just going to go to the Assorted Styles menu here. And what you'll see is a number of different styles available. You can choose any of these, but what you'll find is that the ones that have this little clock next to them are going to run a little bit faster. So let's go with default styles here and see. I think there's some fast ones here. Yeah, these are quite fast. So if your model is slowing down, apply a much quicker style. Make sure that it has the settings that you want. So for example, I don't want to see this section fill. I'll just turn that off in this menu. But now this will update a lot faster when I make changes. You might say, well, but isn't that style one of the features that's saved here in my scene? Well, it is. So you'll need to update your scene in order to make it make the changes stick. Okay, and basically I have applied a different style to this scene and this view to back scene. If I want to modify this scene even further, so let's say I want to have a style that is for my interior perspective, so I don't want the section cuts active anymore. What I can do, I'll go back to my Styles menu. I'll select, go back to select, and go to the Home button. So then that'll show me all the styles which are active in my project. And I think I'm going to take this shaded with textures model. Well, no, I'll take this one. And I'm going to make a copy of it. And in the copy, I'm going to make the section planes go off. Okay. And I'll just go to the Edit menu, and I'll turn section cuts off. And you see now I have a view of my ceiling. I'll just update the style, and then I'll update my scene. And the trick here is always to remember that every scene has a style associated with it. Now, you might say, this seems like an awful lot of trouble to deal with. Well, one of the things that's very nice is if you have multiple scenes and you don't like the way it prints out, for example, you can go and make changes to the style and it will update all of your scenes. Now, I have a view to the back. Let's get a view to the front. I'm just going to click my little position camera tool, and I'm going to position him on the ground on the opposite side of the project and look the other way. Now, maybe I'm going to pan over to the left a little bit so that this is a 2-point perspective. Note that you can also use the walk tool to walk either forward or backward. I always get a kick out of the way it kind of bounces over the furniture. You can use the look around tool to kind of tweak the 2-point perspective. The other thing that you can do is under the camera pull down menu, there is an option to force it to be a 2-point perspective. And you might be saying, isn't it already a 2-point perspective? Well, no, sorry to tell you. These are actually a 3-point perspective. Look at the way the columns go up towards they go out to infinity and down to some vanishing point underground. This is in fact a 3-point perspective. And obviously 3-point perspectives, that's not your usual view. What you'll see is that all the verticals will now be forced to be parallel. This again is a much more architectural view. Now, I could call up my scenes menu, but I can also just right-click on this scene and choose Add. And it will add a new scene. Now, of course, I don't have my scene manager to rename it. So let's rename this scene 3 to call it View to Front. There we go. So we have a couple of perspective views. Now, what if we want to have a floor plan view? Well, floor plans are a little more complicated. First of all, they're looking down, and typically there's going to be a section plane active. What I want to do, I want to look straight down. Well, SketchUp provides a way to do that. If you go to Camera, Standard Views, Top, or Command 1, Control 1 on a PC, now I'm looking straight down. And this actually makes for a very nice bird's eye view. But you can also get rid of perspective. And if you just go to the camera pull down menu, choose parallel projection. And now, suddenly, you have a floor plan. Now, there's a few further things that I want to tweak here, but what I want to do, I don't want to change the styles applied to any of my perspective views. So I'm going to go back to my styles menu one last time, go to Select, and I'm going to make a copy of this one, and I'm going to call it Orthographic Views. And I'm even going to spell it right. And then I'm going to edit this. And I'm going to tweak a few settings. First of all, I'm going to turn off guides and model axes because I don't want to see those in floor plan. I'm also going to make sure that my section line width, which is to say the line width of objects that are cut through, is a little heavier. Maybe 6 is more to my liking. And you see how much darker that is? I haven't drawn wall thicknesses or anything like that. So having a much thicker section width really makes things show up nicely. There's a few other things that you can do, including you can change the color of the ground and the sky, but you want to make sure that it's absolutely white, and that will make for a much nicer plan. Okay, so I'll click Update, and then I'm going to add this scene, and be sure to call it Floor Plan. If I wanted to draw an elevation, which I do, what I can do, I'm going to rotate my model up here a little bit. Now it looks a little weird because it's in axonometric, but that's okay. We can handle that. And maybe I'll cut a section looking towards my service counter, go to my section plane tool, get it in the green direction, and I'll hold down Shift. I think I'll just place this section right in the middle of the project. Now you might say, how do I get this thing to look like the orthographic view I had before? Well, you just your styles menu one more time, go to Select, and make sure you choose the orthographic style. Just click once to apply it. But the other thing is, I want this to be a flat elevation. You see how I'm seeing the sides of these walls? Well, there you just go to the camera, standard view, and I can't remember if I'm looking to the right or the left. I always get the wrong one. Camera, standard views, back. Let's try that. There we go. Zoom in a little bit, and you'll see it has that nice heavy section fill that we saw before. Now that we have some lovely axonometric views, how can we export these views to either a form which can be submitted for homework, which, hint, hint, that's what I'd like you to do, or how can we submit them, place them onto a sheet of drawings? Well, it's really pretty straightforward. Just go to the File pull-down menu, choose Export, and 2D Graphic. And what will happen, you can only export one view at a time. And look at that, you can export things as an AutoCAD file format. That doesn't really do us a whole lot of good, though. Usually JPEG is the preferred format, although PDF or PNG will work fine. I think I'm going to use a PNG file. And let's take a look at some of the options here. While we're at it, by default, SketchUp uses the size of your screen, but you can make this a larger size. So for example, if you know you're going to be printing it, say 25 inches wide, you're going to want to save this at about 5,000 pixels. And you see how it locks the screen size. Note, by the way, that if you have changed the size of the SketchUp window so that it's a smaller format, this size will be smaller. You'll need to use a custom size. Anyway, just click OK and browse to find a location, and we'll just call it Plan. And there you have it in our little preview window. PNG's preview, when you use the preview tool in a Mac, the PNG background shows up as black. It's actually empty, which is just a little handy when you go to lay out your projects.